Hi, and welcome to the Natural Doctors webinar this evening.
We are really happy to speak to Mark Bryant, who is a cancer survivor. He's a coach and he's an inspirational speaker. And yeah, it's going to be a great webinar tonight.
Hi, Mark.
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's great to be here.
Perfect. So we'd like to start with a little bit of a background, if that's all right. So if you wouldn't mind starting with essentially your diagnosis and how that came about and roughly kind of a timeline of that.
Yeah, back in 2015, I was the managing director of a company. There was a couple hundred people working under my responsibility and navigating a very challenging time in business. And I just became tired. You know, it was June 2015. I'd just been to the Children's Sports Day, and one of my friends reflected back a few years ago and said, Mark, for the first time ever, I'd seen you sitting down. And he said, you gave me permission to sit down because I was also tired on that day too. And it was interesting that was his memory from 2 or 3 years previous. So I left the sports day, and Fiona in my kitchen here was just like, Mark, don't go to deliver the training. I know it's important, but you're knackered. Your back's hurting. Don't go. And I said, no, I need to go. You know, I've promised to deliver this for the last 2 months and I've not got round to it. We need to launch this new division of the company. And off I trot, get in my car, really uncomfortable. I stopped at A&E in North Wales and I traipsed across the car park. I was like, how long's the wait here at A&E? The receptionist said, look, it's 4 hours. And all I wanted was some stronger painkillers than Brufen or paracetamol. Mm-hmm. And so I trucked on over to Barnsley in Yorkshire and into the hotel. I plugged my car in because I had Tesla at the time. And I walked into the bar and I asked for a whiskey, thinking that could take the edge off the pain. And I was Googling for an emergency chiropractor when I got back to the hotel room. And all these emergency chiropractors that have their mobile numbers, nobody bloody answered. And then this pain got to the point where I had to call an ambulance. And by this time, it was all in my ribs and it was in my lower back and it was just uncomfortable, you know. And so I asked the nurse when I got to the hospital, I said, what's the ascension of painkillers? Because I don't want to go too heavy because I still want to go and deliver the training in the morning. And that's how determined I was. Yeah. And anyway, they took my bloods, which I thought was a bit strange because I was like, I've got back pain. I just need to see a chiropractor tomorrow. And they said, no, it's standard practice. And then a few hours later, a few drugs later, the doctor came in and said, look, you're not going anywhere. We're not happy with your bloods. And a few years previous, I'd had a similar conversation with somebody about my mum, and my mum passed away due to cancer. So in my head, I was like, what's this? This could be quite serious, but you know, it wouldn't happen to me. I'm the guy that drinks green juice. I do sport. I take the dog out for a walk. And I'm not the sort of person that would get ill. Surely not me. 36 years old, 2 kids. And lo and behold, the next morning, the doctor comes in and says, Mark, I'm really sorry to tell you this. I was in a haze of morphine by this time. I'd cancelled the training and one of my best friends was there. And the doctor came in and said, Mark, you've got acute leukemia. So I was like, what's the difference? He said, well, you've either got chronic or acute. And to the untrained medical eye, I was like, well, acute sounds quite nice and not so difficult. It sounded better for some reason than chronic. But as it transpires, a few weeks later, steroid stabilization, and then I was thrown straight into a full intensity stem cell transplant. I was very fortunate. I had my brother and my sister who were both an exact match, and my brother was chosen for my donor. So on the 17th September, after 8 weeks of really intensive chemotherapy and radiotherapy, I received my brother's stem cells. So 17th September, day before my wedding anniversary. And I had 4 weeks in isolation then, where you're in a positive pressure room. I couldn't see the kids for 3 weeks when I was in the hospital. But all the way through my healing, that journey, I was like, what can I do other than what I'm being offered? Like, can I not have the medicine and the treatment that I was being offered? Can I do something else? But I'd never found anything or enough to take the leap of faith, because everybody, you know, family and friends were all ushering you to say, look, you've got to stay on this path. You've got to have the treatment. It's the best thing for you. And I was like, I don't know whether it is, to be honest. I think there might be another way. And so I was searching and searching. But by the time you've had like massive amounts of chemotherapy and 4 days of full body radiotherapy and someone else's organ, you're feeling pretty smashed at the end of that. So 6 months later, April 2016, got called in a week early for my routine result. And my oncologist, Adrian at the Christie, said, Mark, it's not good news. It's coming back. And it was in that moment I said, look, don't tell me the revised prognosis. I'll just focus on getting better. And it was only then that I met a naturopath. Like I'd met lots of nutritionists. I'd really looked at the nutrition, but not looked at functional medicine or a naturopathic approach. And because I'd seen a naturopathic doctor, he helped me get off the fence. He introduced me to science and evidence to support, you know, strong links between lifestyle, viruses, electromagnetic radiation, and the being massively contributory factors to leukemia specifically. And I was like, okay, well, look, if stuff that I can control helped create the disease, therefore I'm in more control of my disease. And I'm not at the mercy of my oncologist. So everything I was doing to help me, it wasn't just me doing it in the wake of modern medicine. It was me doing it as an equal to modern medicine. So there was a huge shift in my mindset. And it's almost like the placebo effect going, okay, well, I've got this. And I've since discovered it was considered terminal at that point. So yeah, 7 years later, training for an Ironman.
Yeah, which is unbelievable. And I think, you know, you also did the triathlon a few years later, so it shows you how much healthier you were. And I think, yeah, thank you, James.
Yeah, if you could talk us through these pictures,
that would be great. Years later, so it shows you how much.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
That was a bit of background noise from the YouTube link. Sorry. So there's so much that's happened. Like, where would you like me to dive
Well, if we go
into?
for these two pictures, so on the left-hand side we have the first picture, don't we? So that must be quite soon after your treatment.
Yeah, so that was November 2015. So that was a month after I came out of hospital. I came out of hospital a lot quicker than most, because usually it's a 4 to 6 week isolation cycle. And then the picture afterwards was when I'd been to America for a few times to have immunotherapy treatment with an oncologist. And when I came back for my 40th birthday for 2018, I set my intention to start my vision, which was when I was in the hospital. I was like, after I've got through this, I'm going to complete an Ironman. But the Ironman event is not one of those things you can just go and do. It's taken me a few years to build myself up after all that treatment to have the physical and mental confidence to go and do it.
We're just doing a regular triathlon isn't exactly something you can go into lightly. The idea of going into an Ironman version is, a triathlon times 10.
But you look so much healthier between these two different outcomes, I think, and it's a nice contrast to see. So I suppose really if we look at the one on the left again, so this is after you've had the initial treatment in 2015, but this isn't, of course, when you had the relapse. Relapse, of course, is in April the next year. So, I mean, how long are we talking then from that relapse to this picture on the right? Is just about 3 years?
Yeah, so it would have been November 15, 16, 17, 18. So it's 2.5 years to that picture, yeah.
And do we know now, if we look back at when you had the relapse, I mean, what sort of prognosis? I know you didn't want it at the time, but do you know how long they would have given you at that point? You said it was terminal, but
a mean survival of less than 6 months. And I had 3 life insurance companies pay out my life insurance as a result of being terminal. I didn't have critical illness insurance. So I'm one of I've never met anybody else that's claimed the life insurance and is still here. My oncologist has he's had a few patients that have got their life insurance, had a life expectancy of say 12 months, spent all their money, and then they're still alive. And then they're like, oh, look, I've run out of money. And But anyway, I'm not sure how long they survived. So, but it, you know, stress is a massive contributing factor to illness, you know. And for me, I was so lucky to have to go through that process, because receiving your life insurance early took a whole piece of the jigsaw out of the equation.
Financial freedom.
Yeah. So when I went to Hippocrates, when I had the relapse in April 2016, I saw the naturopath 3 days later. His recommendation was to go raw and drink a litre of juice a day or 2 litres of juice a day and do daily coffee enemas.
Yeah.
So really detoxify the body.
Yeah. It's quite like the Gerson therapy a little bit.
Yeah. So he gave me the protocol, a stack of supplements to start taking, and then he used a bioresonance scanner. We had a 4-hour consultation, and then I was the most annoying client he'd ever had, because I was like, what do I eat? When do I eat it? How do you eat raw foods? I bought a few raw food courses. I'd been down some rabbit holes before I had the stem cell transplant. So when I got ill, I'd looked at macrobiotic approach. I'd had a macrobiotic practitioner come and work with me. I had a macrobiotic chef come and live with me for a few days to teach me how to eat macrobiotically, because I had found one cancer patient that had overcome acute lymphoblastic leukemia with a macrobiotic lifestyle. But you know, that was great. They wanted to balance my yang. And so I was eating a lot of root vegetables, and my sister and my wife, they were eating the same foods for the few weeks, and they felt so grounded they couldn't get off there. They were like, oh my god,
good for your spleen. It's good for you.
Yeah. So that was quite interesting. But you get introduced to some of the amazing food kingdoms that we don't really come across. So seaweed was one of the biggest take homes I had from that. So anyway, this naturopath thought I was a pain in the bum, and I came across a lady called Max Tuck, called the Raw Food Scientist, and so she had been trained as a health educator by the Hippocrates Health Institute in West Palm Beach in Florida. She'd overcome what's the real tiredness? Epstein-Barr disease virus. So she was, you know, the scientist that gave me a protocol to follow, which is essentially Hippocrates Health Institute's protocol. And I then felt, and then I had her friend, who is a chef version of her, come and live with me for a few days, and I went and lived with her for a few days and said, right, this is how I do it. So I was eating like 50% living foods, lots of seaweeds by this point, kelp and nori and dulse.
And how did you feel on that?
I felt fine, to be honest, because you can do raw vegan well, and you can do vegan not well, you know. And I think that because I had such an abundance of nutrients, I bought a cultivator, and so I was growing trays and trays and trays of wheatgrass and sunflower and snow pea, and I was having daily implants of wheatgrass, drinking wheatgrass, and so by the time I got to 10 o'clock, I used to joke and laugh, because I'd like the amount of nutrients I'd had by the time I got to 10 o'clock was probably more than most people would have in a week.
Or maybe
a year.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So I my body was really good on it, you know. So I was really determined to get to Hippocrates to go and experience it for real. And so by June, I was on the way. I'd had an all clear bone marrow after my relapse. I was on a second line chemo. I'd had some more of my brother's cells, and then I got graft versus host. And when I got graft versus host, that was the time in August 2016 that I thought, I feel pretty vulnerable right now, because I lost 6 kilos. I couldn't eat. My brother's cells were attacking my gut. And I had to check myself back into hospital, and they put me on some pretty good steroids. And it took me about 2 or 3 weeks. But it was in that moment of vulnerability where I was like, savings are decreasing. How do I pay for my mortgage? How do I look after my kids? And that was the time when I came into my office and was like, maybe my life insurance covers me for something other than death. And that's when I learned about terminal. I had to wait a week for my oncologist to come back, and he then phoned me as soon as he came back into work, and he said, "Do you want me to write you off?" I was like, "Yeah, I think so." And literally, the insurance companies, it was a phone call. And they said, "Look, I'm really sorry. You don't need to worry about it. All you need to do is just, give us these few details, and then we'll write to your oncologist." And then literally within a few weeks, I was paid out on 3 policies.
Yeah, which made a big difference.
Amazing. So that enabled me, once I'd overcome the graft versus host, to fly to America and do their 3-week life transformation program. And it was at that point, the big shift for me there was I hadn't started to do any therapy or inner work as such, to start to unpick some of the layers of my onion, so to speak. And so they have a therapy as a part of the program. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. A counselor, or a therapist, psychotherapist. And then he started to unpick some, it was anger. It was like, why don't you get angry? I was like, it's not kind of welcome. You get taught not to be angry. And then it was a whole, piece of the jigsaw where I started to go through the emotional, psychological, and spiritual part of my healing journey. So I came back. I came back. I had 2 all clears, which was amazing, and I thought I have to teach everybody about raw foods. So I ran my first workshop in January 2017. It was teaching people about living in raw foods, and then I had a positive reading of my disease. So my oncologist in England said, "Do you want? Well, you've got a few options. Do nothing, and we'll monitor. Take blinatumomab, a month in hospital on chemo, or number 3 was maybe you could be eligible for a trial, CAR T therapy or something." And I heard about an oncologist in Florida that practiced immunotherapy. And I then had a consultation with him. The investment was like 100,000 to go there. And I had another bone marrow in England. And at that time, I was planning, like, if I went to America and anything happened, I can't get insurance. And I can't get insurance. And then how much would it cost to ship my dead body back from America? These are the sorts of planning logistics that I went through. And my oncologist in England said, if you go, I don't support the treatment. Bupa wouldn't cover me, even though I thought they should, because of the terms of the, because of the terms of the treatment. And my oncologist in England said, "You're wasting your kid's inheritance." So after 3 bone marrow biopsies, February, March, and April, I went and I started my program with Maharaj on the 1st of May. And so I went there 4 times for 4 6-week cycles. And after the first one, I had an all clear. Second one, it was a POQR, but my natural killer cell function improved. Third one, so I didn't complete all the treatment he wanted me to complete. And I'm still here. So I've had, since my bone marrow transplant, I have had 20 bone marrows. 7 have been all
Those
clear.
aspects, like looking at the cells.
Yeah, taking the bone marrow out the hips. So 7 have been all clear, which is great. That is like the best news. 13 have been positive on the outer range, which is we can still see it. And in the UK or in modern medicine, they would normally be treated. Patients would normally be treated. And I chose not to have treatment at that point. And so I think by going to Maharaj, I saved my own life by not having treatment. I wouldn't have not gone to America and not done anything. I would have done something. Because when I was looking at
that you were trying to
say
do
again.
So the treatments that you were trying to do, otherwise the treatments weren't working. The stem cell, you were rejecting your stem cells, and possibly the chemotherapy wasn't suiting you either.
Yeah. So I'm still here and very well, and I still have a disease marker that pops up every now and then, which is really frustrating.
And what would you credit as being some of the biggest things that you've done that you've made the big, obviously that treatment that you've done in America, other things, the diet?
Functional medicine. So when I first went to Maharaj, he added in the functional medicine piece of the jigsaw. So, I paid for a lot of testing at that time I went there, and microbiome testing, heavy metal testing and all of the functional testing that you do, he did for me. And I was just like, why didn't I think of this before? Like, it makes complete sense. Like, why doesn't anybody else do this? It's like logic, right? You don't run a business looking at a profit and loss and not at the balance sheet, not at the cash flow. You look at the whole thing, don't you?
Yep.
And so I think, you know, a preventative and proactive approach to health is looking at the whole person and not just through the lens of the disease.
And that's really where the important factor comes in, because really what we're looking at before, I mean, you mentioned a little bit about what you were going through at the time of your initial diagnosis. And you said you were the person who does green juicing, a person who exercises, but you can't help but see you were the managing director, you had a lot of employees, you were launching a new company. I'm just hearing stress, 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 stress. And it seems to be that it doesn't matter, you know, you can do a lot of things for your health, but the stress and the emotional side, that can just take over.
Yeah, that's an ongoing journey. And I love that part of my healing journey. So when I was in America doing the treatment, the time I spent with Dr. Maharaj became less. The first time it was all about Maharaj. The second time, I could go to his clinic for 20 minutes and have my daily injection based on yesterday's results. I didn't have to wait all day. So all of the other time that I had in Florida was to just, you know, do all the different treatments and therapies and weekend workshops and meditation workshops and breath work workshops, cold therapy. I just went and did everything. Went into, you know, infused ketamine that they use in addiction clinics, because it was sort of a gateway to your consciousness. And so I tried everything to really expand my own mind and transform from within, and just get rid of any blocks or emotional blocks that may have been contributors to my emotional stress, you know, because I might project a positive face to the world, but on the inside there's suffering, there's pain, there's hurt, there's disconnection, there's isolation. And I think, you know, that we live in a world of duality, and when you transcend into like the world, you know, more of a spiritual realm, you're part of everything and everyone. Whereas then we have to come into this realm and be something and someone, and then that's where we start to get, you know, the two extremes of pain and pleasure. And it's learning how to deal with the pain more efficiently, and to move through the struggles and the stresses. And that's the bit I love, and that's why I coach business owners now, because I just want to help them not get into the same traps and emotional traps I did. Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, it's that problem of also being at the top, isn't it? I know I tell my patients off for it when they walk in the room, and I say, how are you? They go, I'm fine. I go, how are you? Fine. And I go, it's great. So everyone's fine. How are we really? And it's a very big thing, of course, if you're on the top of the tree, isn't it? Everyone goes, how are you? And it's a total shock when you turn around and go, actually, I'm quite stressed today.
We're taught not to.
Yeah, I'm actually quite good today.
They don't know what to do with it. They're like, oh. And you go, actually, no, it's okay to tell the truth. And it's interesting. And then when they realize telling the truth, they go, okay, well, tell me about it. And before you know it, you've told them a bit, and you go, I feel better. And it's that kind of that world we live in now, where we're kind of taught everything should be fine. We should take that emotion and push it down.
And we don't talk about spirituality, and we don't talk about that when you receive a terminal diagnosis. You know, when you receive a diagnosis, it's incredibly frightening. It's a really important side, I think, to talk about. The spiritual and the emotional side is something that in medicine we're not very good at, I don't think.
Yeah,
I think it's incredibly important to do.
It's incredible, especially when you're given a terminal idea, because, you know, it's the idea of, you know, your brain is kind of what's next, and you realize you've never really developed that idea of what do I do next.
Not taught it anywhere.
No,
but I think that you know, the narrative that we create for ourselves, you know, a lot of it is based on the cultural norm. So if I have hinged my thinking on terminal, then my destiny could have been terminal, you know, based on the usual. Yeah. So my beautiful teacher from school gave me this book, When Someone Has a Very Serious Illness, and it explains a useful graphical book for the kids to go through. And in there it said, where is it? And in there it said, some are terminal and bring death. And I took that and I put it on the shelf. And I didn't share that with the children whatsoever. And I didn't even share that with myself. As soon as I see stuff like that, that is like, right, put that out of my mind. Show me other people that have overcome challenging situations, and that's going to be my story. And I think that
hope's important. I think that hope is very important for a patient. I think that when you show them that someone can heal, I always say that if one person can heal, your healing mechanisms, we all have them in our bodies, then you must have that ability within you as well. And that hope is important. I think when a doctor goes, you're going to die, that's a very dangerous thing to say to someone.
But it's even more, it's also the diagnosis of the words, isn't it? I mean, we hear the word leukemia, cancer. They don't come, stress-free, those words. Those words come with, well, our grandmother, our father, our favorite granddad, he had cancer and he died. And immediately you've gone down that rabbit hole. Yeah. Because you know someone who's had that. Yeah. And so it comes with huge emotions.
It's why you've got a lot of power and inspiration in what you're doing. I think, it's a really amazing thing to show people that isn't necessarily the outcome. And I know it's not an easy battle. That definitely doesn't sound like an easy and an ongoing journey. But I think it just shows people that there is a different way. There is a different journey that they can go through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I use now with cancer patients that come and talk to me, I call it like the SOS recovery process. Okay. And so the three parts to it is, and I looked, what does SOS stand for? And it's save our soul or save our ship in the context of boating or yachting or something. But save our soul is, so the S that stands for strategy is like really getting the strategy nailed on and understand that the NHS and modern medicine is one piece of the jigsaw, but then to look outside of that to the likes of, a naturopathic doctor, care oncology if it's cancer, looking for communities online that have, and look for evidence of people that have overcome it. Don't look for evidence for people that haven't. And it's like, look for the inspiration, because that's what's going to drive you forward, particularly through the tough times. So the strategy, once you've got your strategy, like what's my nutrition? How am I going to improve my sleep? How am I going to, elimination was a massive one for me. I call it the fresh formula, feeling fresh formula. So food, rest, exercise, and elimination. And you'll be able to tell me this, but our lymphatic system is 3, 4, 5 times the volume of our blood. Is that right?
Yeah, it's massive. Yeah, it's massive.
And so, when you go to Hippocrates, there's like lymphatic massage there. You've got things like rebounding, general exercising, body brushing, all of that kind of stuff. And
Epsom salt.
So the elimination and detoxification process is massively important. Infrared saunas. So that was
the toxins are what have increased our cancer rates so much anyway. When we look at what's increased them from where they used to be, we're now at 1 in 2, and we used to be, 1 in 50, 1 in 100 even. That increase, we argue, could be toxin related. It's one of the main factors: radiation, toxins, all of those things.
Mixed radiation.
So drainage and detoxification become really, really important in that process.
Yeah, and then supplementation and hydration with a sort of strategy, and then how do you operationalize that? And sometimes to make significant lifestyle changes it's almost like to hack other people that are doing it. So that's why I got, and I've got a whole YouTube video series sharing what I had in my kitchen setup when I did my raw foods, which is still useful because I think sprouted foods are still high on my agenda.
Right.
Broccoli sprouts in particular.
Yes. Yeah, with the sulforaphane, definitely.
So how to operationalize it, and then the spiritual and emotional and psychological elements as well too. Just sort of, Louise Hay, that still sits with me, and in her book,
we love Louise Hay. We love Louise Hay.
Heal Your Life. And for leukemia, it was brutally killing inspiration. So at some level, I was projecting someone else to the world, but on the inside, I was forgetting who I really was. And so there's been this recoupling between my inner self and my outer self, because I was living through an identity of someone I thought everybody else wanted me to be. So I was that person, but I've forgotten who I really was on the inside. And so it's that reconnection with my inner being and making it more integrated with my outward persona. That's why I'm still going through this career transition. And, you know, coaching seems to be the path that I'm enjoying quite a bit at the minute.
I think using your experience and helping others is incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
And your story is amazing because it shows that it can be done. It's not easy, but then I always think that, you know, I don't see why, you know, you want to live. So
anything we grow with isn't easy. Anything that makes us grow, makes us change, isn't easy.
And passive living isn't going to work because, you know, that's how sickness happens. You have to actively want to live. And that's a really powerful story. And thank you so much, Mark, for sharing it with us. It was absolutely incredible.
And we'll put your links up for your coaching for any of the other things you've mentioned. We'll pop on as well into our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody just heads to terminaltotriathlon.com, and on there there's my podcast and where I bring people that I've met on my healing journey, and you know, you can both come on it when I catch up with my edits, and it'll be great to have you on there and share some of your stories and your journey and your passion going from, you know, switching from the NHS and then looking at setting up your own private practice and then following your heart and helping more people. It's amazing.
But it's been a great journey for me too. And I think when you get into that natural side, you never go back. It's a bit like the Matrix. Once you step out, sometimes you struggle to go back again.
And it's only really when you look backwards and you realize where you've come from and you go, wow, that was quite the epic journey. And you just can't do it in one leap. You do have to do it piece by piece. That's what we love.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for having me on. And if anybody would like to connect or ask me any questions, then I'm always an ear and here to help it wherever I can.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a great evening.
You too.